Well, hello there, eighth graders. Looks like we're about to do us a little bit of a little lesson on some exponents. So fasten your seatbelts, grab yourself a blank piece of note paper. Like River Kavarik says, I'm going to present now. And we are going to then talk a little bit about some exponents. So yeah, on top of your little piece of paper there, if you're going to write the word exponent, E-X-P-O-N-E. Yeah. Sorry about that, boys and girls. Exponents. You will become exponent experts today. We're going to do two things, but the first one is basically the simplest one. It is called the zero exponent property. Zero exponent property. And we've talked about this before. You know what it is. It simply means this, ladies and gentlemen. Get this in your noggins right here. This is the big thing to remember. Anything, and I repeat, anything to the zero power or exponent is, write this in humongous numbers, ladies and gentlemen, simply 1. Anything to the zero property is 1. That's the best I can do with this thing. So, for example, ladies and gentlemen, check this out. If you have x to the zero property, that is 1. If you have 3,236 to the zero power, that equals 1. If you have, now you have to be careful here. Here's where people kind of run into mistakes. If I have this, if I have x to the third power, y to the zero power, okay, remember, exponents only go for what's directly in front of them. This zero exponent only goes for the y, which means that actually is 1, and that is getting multiplied by the x cubed. So technically, that whole thing is just written as x cubed. You don't need that y to the zero power. Okay, now, however, if this was the case, if it was x to the third power, y, and then there was a parenthesis, and that was to the zero power, then the whole thing equals 1, because that exponent goes strictly for what's in front of it. Okay, so the basic gist is there anytime you see that zero exponent, really, anytime you see that zero exponent out there, you know, you're just going to change something to whatever 1. So for example, you know, if you have a squared b to the zero power, you know, this whole thing doesn't even matter, so just get rid of it. As long as it's next to something, it's just going to be a squared. So you don't need all that sort of stuff. Now, second thing, going to be take a little bit longer, a little more complicated, and that is still under exponents. It is under exponents. But what happens when they're negative? What happens when you get negative exponents? For example, let me just tell you this. 5 to the negative 2 power. First of all, negative exponents are not your friends. We don't like negative exponents. We do everything in our power to get rid of negative exponents. Now I'm going to start kind of from the beginning and try to get you to understand where this actually comes from here. So let's take a look at this. Let's think about this. Back in the day, you know, we used to do something like this. We would have 25 over 125. And the book would tell you to prime factorize those, to reduce them. I mean, it makes it complicated, but let's do that. If I prime factorize 25, it's 5 times 5, right? If I prime factorize 125, just take my word for it, it is 5 times 5 times 5. Okay, if I write these out as exponents, this is 5 squared, and this is 5 cubed. Now, if you take your Wayback Machine way back, And we talked about when we don't put this on hold just for a minute. We're going to come back to this in a second here. Put your Wayback Machines way back. When we had things like this, when we had x to the 5th power over x to the 3rd power, and you were asked to simplify that, one way you could have done it was to write out all 5 of those x's. Let me scooch this over. Write out all 5 of those x's on top and write out all 3 of those x's on the bottom, and then cross off 1 for 1. So this x cross off of that x, second x with the second x, and you'd end up with 2 x's on top, which was x squared. Well, rather than having to do that, another way that you could do that is you could subtract exponents. If you take 5 minus 3, you get that x squared that we got when we did this. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if I use that same philosophy here and I subtract exponents here, if I take 2 and subtract 3 from it, I get 5 to the negative 1 power. Okay, that's what that actually gives me. What really is 5 to the negative 1 power? 5 to the negative 1 power, if we go back over here to the fraction we started with, and we prime factorize that, we cross off 1 for 1, I end up with 1 over 5. 5 to the negative 1 power is 1/5 as a fraction. 5 to the negative 1 power is 1/5 as a fraction. 5 to the negative 2 power, if you think about, if we did that over here, that simply means that you ended up with no 5's on top and 2 5's on bottom. It's actually 1/25 is what this works. Now, if that made any sense to you, it does not really matter, because here is the fundamental rule when it comes to negative exponents. And write this down in humongo letters. Okay, this is the simple rule for negative exponents. You want to make negative exponents positive. So what you do is this: to, write down, to make negative exponents I hate it when I push that button, sorry kids. To make negative exponents positive, comma, move the exponent with its base either from the top of the fraction or vice versa, and make the exponent positive. Okay, now that obviously is going to take just a touch of explaining because it's kind of wordy, and a lot of times those word things just don't make a lot of sense. But that simply means this. If I had, well, let's do this. If I have 1 over 3 to the negative 2 power, I don't deal with negative exponents. I want to make this negative to positive. What you simply do, since this is on the bottom of the fraction, if you move it from the bottom to the top of the fraction, the exponent actually just becomes positive. So this ends up being 3 to the 2nd power, which simply is 9 if you do the math. You know, if I had 1 over y to the negative 3 power, I just move that whole base and exponent to the top. It becomes y to the positive 3 power. Some examples the book will give you is this. If you have, if you have x to the 3rd power over x to the negative 7 power, you need to make this exponent positive. So you move the base and its exponent to the top. It becomes x to the positive 7 power. and then you can combine those. X to the third and x to the seventh is, I'm sorry, x to the 10th power. Okay, another example straight from the book here. Let's do a really super complicated sort of thing here, and maybe you can see how this goes. If you have x to the negative 5th and y to the 6th and z, and that is all over z to the negative 3rd y squared x. Okay, and you are asked to simplify this. There is so many different avenues we could pursue, but let's talk about this. Maybe step number one is you should make all negative exponents positive. Okay, which means this. I need to make this positive, so I take it with its base and move it to the bottom of the fraction, and it becomes x to the 5th power. This is z to the negative 3rd power I need to move, and I move it to the top, and it becomes z to the positive 3rd power. So now let me just rewrite this to clarify some stuff. So I have y to the 6th on top, I have this z that was already there, and then I have z to the 3rd. On the bottom, I have y squared, I have x, and I have x to the 5th. All right, now we can still do some more simplifying here. I can put these two z's together. I have z to the 1st multiplied by z to the 3rd. I have z to the 4th power. I can put the two x's, x times x to the 5th gives me x to the 6th power. And then here, just like you could always do, you can cross cancel or do whatever you want. You have 6 y's on top and 2 y's on the bottom. They cross off 1 for 1, and you're left with 4 y's on top. So this would be y to the 4th power. So simplified, notice there's no negative exponents, there's no multiple letters. This whole thing that we started off with simplified to this crazy thing here. So let's try another from the book here. If they give us something too terribly difficult. How about this problem right here? Let's do, let me start with a fresh page. One more, and I'll set you free. Let's say I have x squared, y to the negative 3rd power, z to the 8th power, over y to the 5th power, x to the negative 2 power, and z to the, I don't know, 2nd power. Okay. Again, first things you might want to do is make your negative exponents positive. So I'm going to move this y term, take it to the bottom, and it's going to be y to the positive 3rd. Please understand it doesn't change the letter to a negative. It only works with only deals with the exponents. And I also need to do the same thing with this. I need to move my x to the top, and it becomes x to the positive 2 power. Okay, so this is no longer here, and this is no longer here. Now I need to simplify it just like I would always do. Let's just rewrite this here. I'm going to rewrite it just for clarification again. I have an x squared on top over here. I have a z to the 8th right here, and another x squared that I moved from the bottom. And that is all going to be over a y cubed, a y to the 5th, and a z squared. Now, I can put a few things together. I can combine these two top x squared terms to get x to the 4th. I'm going to move this out of the way. And I still have that z to the 8th. And on the bottom, I can put these two y terms together to get y to the 8th. And I still have a z squared. Now, you're not quite done yet. I simplified my x's and my y's, but now I have 8 z's on top and 2 z's on bottom. And two ways you can think about it. You have those 8, you have those 2, you can cross off 1 for 1. Or also, remember, the deal is this. If you have the same thing, you can subtract exponents. 8 minus 2 is 6. So on top, I have z to the 6th power. I still have that x to the 4th I started with. And I have y to the 8th power. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is that whole thing simplified. So hopefully, children, that's a kind of a tough thing to do. It's one of those things where you got to take your time, write big, just make sure you got everything kind of in order, keep it straight, and focus a little bit. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn off said fair recording, and I'll see you in class.